I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. The House Judiciary Committee held a markup Thursday on gun control legislation. The emergency meeting comes as a string of recent mass shootings has gripped the nation. Congressman Steve Chabot believes a place lawmakers can find common ground is making schools in the U.S. more secure. The Ohio Republican also called on Congress to find a bipartisan solution to address, quote, the mental health crisis that's facing many of our nation's youth today. Here's more from Chabot's remarks.
All right, Claire Ford, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. It's obviously with a heavy heart that we're all participating in this markup today. Words cannot adequately express the horror that all Americans felt last week as we learned of the 21 innocent lives that were lost at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, which only added to the deep sadness we all felt a short time earlier when 10 people were senselessly killed in Buffalo. Given the shock and the revulsion that we all feel from those two horrific crimes, it's easy to understand why we're considering this legislation today. It's only human nature to search for answers and feel the need to do something to address a situation this troubling and this concerning. But the question we need to ask ourselves before we act, Mr. Chairman, is what actions can we take in a constitutionally permissive manner that will actually help make the American people, particularly school children, safer? The most obvious answer to that question is that we can take action to make our schools more secure. After the tragic shooting in Parkland, Florida, former sheriff himself led a bipartisan group of members, myself included, in reauthorizing and expanding the Cop Secure Our Schools grant program. That program provides necessary funds to states and local school districts to strengthen security measures at schools across the country. The money can be used for metal detectors, to adopt security plans, to train school officials, to hire school resource officers, including retired police officers, and to help identify students with mental health issues. The students and teachers, but there's always room for improvement. And that's one area where I believe we could be working together to find common ground and make students safer, and it would be immediately. I also think we could work together on methods to better address the mental health crisis that's facing so many of our nation's youth today. Too often, the shootings that occur are perpetrated by primarily young men who feel marginalized and who appear to be suffering from some form or another of mental illness. Finding a way to identify these young people earlier and to help get them the treatment that they need before the tragedy strikes is a goal upon which I think we could all agree. As I mentioned earlier, the Secure Our Schools grant money can be used for that purpose. But as we saw in Buffalo, the issue is broader than just in our schools. There was also some agreement on bump stocks, which is why the ATF under President Trump acted to ban them. As most of us know, there's still an ongoing challenge in the federal courts against this ban, which is probably why a provision banning bump stocks is included in the legislation being considered today. I understand the intention here, but I would probably, I think it'd be more effective if we allowed the court cases semi-automatic rifles by those under the age of 21. I think this is another area where some form of bipartisan agreement might be possible. However, considering that a similar prohibition in California was just ruled unconstitutional by the Ninth Circuit of all courts 3 weeks ago, it would probably be more prudent that we review that decision and try to determine what could be accomplished in accordance with the Second Amendment. Simply moving forward with a provision that even the Ninth Circuit thinks is unconstitutional really isn't doing anybody any good. And that's the crux of my argument against this legislation. The majority is simply acting quickly because they believe it's important to act quickly. In doing so, I'm afraid they're foregoing an opportunity to actually work together and hopefully produce a better piece of legislation, which is what they're apparently trying to do in the Senate. We could do it in the House as well, Mr. Chairman, but not if the majority is so focused on the speed of the legislation rather than its merits. I think we should stay focused on the merits Unfortunately, that's not what we're doing today. And I yield back.